I was at a loss until you found me. You gave me a home within your love. I was running blind until you showed me that life could be this good. I want all my friends to know about you. No matter what it takes, I'll never stop. Everything I am is for your glory. My life's forever yours. I found wild love, can't control it. Hit me like a wildfire, set me in motion. Nothing else compares, losing all my cares. Now that I have found wild love, wild, wild love. Nothing else compares, losing all my cares. Now that I have found wild love, wild, wild love. Now I'm running far within your freedom. I don't even care what they would say. Living in your presence is the reason I'll never be the same. I want all my friends to know about you. No matter what it takes, I'll never stop. Everything I am is for your glory. My life's forever yours. I found wild love, can't control it. Hit me like a wildfire, set me in motion. Nothing else compares, losing all my cares. Now that I have found wild love, wild, wild love. Nothing else compares, losing all my cares. Now that I have found wild love, wild, wild love. Yeah. Oh. Oh, nothing, no, nothing compares. I found wild love, can't control it. Hit me like a wildfire, set me in motion. Nothing else compares, losing all my cares. Now that I have found wild love, wild, wild love, wild love, can't control it. Hit me like a wildfire, set me in motion. Nothing else compares, losing all my cares. Now that I have found wild love, wild, wild love. Nothing else compares, losing all my cares. Now that I have found wild love, wild, wild love. Hey everybody, welcome to Midweek. We're so happy you're here. We'd love to invite you guys to stand and sing with us.
He's walking on the water. He'll calm your raging sea. No, you don't have to look no further. He's the hope that you need. Oh, if your sails are torn and tattered and your storm just won't cease, take hold of the hand of the Savior, 'cause he's the anchor of peace. There's a way back home for the wandering soul. There's a peaceful calm for the restless one. So if you're so far gone you can't see the shore, then just lift your eyes and look to the Lord. 'Cause he's walking on the water. He'll calm your raging sea. No, you don't have to look no further. He's the hope that you need. Oh, if your sails are torn and tattered and the storm just won't cease, take hold of the hand of the Savior, 'cause he's the anchor of peace. Oh, he's the anchor of peace. See, I was breaking down at the end of my road, but when the sweetest sound silence the noise. Oh, he's the Prince of Peace. was far from the peaceful shore, falling for a hopeless floor. Oh, the wreckage of the fall, there was no way. Then I seen the lighthouse. Oh, I was sinking when I felt your hand. You put my feet back on dry land. But there was no way. Lord made a way out. Oh, thank God for the lighthouse. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's walking on the water. He'll calm your raging sea. No, you don't have to look no further. He's the hope that you need. Oh, if your sails are torn and tattered, and the storm just won't cease, take hold of the hand of the Savior, 'cause he's the anchor of peace. Oh, he's the anchor of peace. Yeah, he's walking on the water. He'll calm your raging sea. No, you don't have to look no further. He's the hope that you need. If your sails are torn and tattered, and your storm just won't cease, then take hold of the hand of the Savior, 'cause he's the anchor of peace. Oh, he's the anchor of peace. Oh, he's the anchor of peace. Yeah, yeah.
Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. At your name, still, call the sea to still, the rage in me to still, every wave. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, breathe, call these bones to leave, call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, 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 you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light Jesus, 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 Jesus. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. You sent the darkness running out of an empty grave, now seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, 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 you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. The God who was and is to come, the power of the risen one, the God who brings the dead to life. You're the God of miracles. You're the God of miracles. The God who was and is to come, the power of the risen one, the God who brings the dead to life. You're the God of miracles. You're the God of miracles. Your name is a light that the cities take tonight. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is the God who brings the dead to life. You're the God of miracles. Cannot be overcome. Your name is the God who was and is to come. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is the God who brings the dead to life. You're the God of miracles. Cannot be overcome. Peace, bring it all the peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. I can name still, call the sea still. The raging need is still every wave. I can name Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus.
Good evening. You know, after you experience worship like that, you get to sit there and listen. I have to talk. It's not always easy. You know, mainly, I think we said the name Jesus about 100 times in those songs. And it just made me aware of what I always know, but that Jesus is not tonight, we're not talking about a historical figure where I can get the facts wrong and you can fact check later. I'm very aware that Jesus is here with us. Are you aware of that? I mean, as we've been singing these words and lifting our hearts to him, he's here. He's in the room, and right now I'm picturing him right there, and I'm a little nervous. Because sometimes, you know, I've been doing this a long time, but you become more aware of the sacredness of what this is and the responsibility he's given to me. And if I'm imagining him there, I don't want to see him shaking his head like, no, Craig, you didn't quite get that one right. So Jesus, I just thank you for being with us, and we love you, and we want to be drawn to you tonight. We've been drawn to you through the worship, but as each of us think about the context of our lives tonight, what we left at home or at work and what we're going home to and what's happening, we need you more than anything. We need the words of those songs that you bring peace and you bring light to us. That's what we long for. And so help me to have the right words. And, you know, I've worked on this message, but even now I want to listen to you. And if you have anything to say to me, I'm listening as we press into this story. So, okay, we're back at the Sea of Galilee. I don't know if you've been here for the first two times. We've been out in the lake twice with the disciples. It seems like when they get in the boat with Jesus, stuff happens. And it's usually amazing stuff and scary stuff. And usually the disciples look like clowns. And they're going to look like clowns again tonight. And remember, you should see yourself in these stories, so you are all clowns, including me. Everyone should identify with the mistake these guys make tonight. I'm an expert at this. I'm just going to be transparent up front saying, I wanted to do this message. In fact, I picked a different one for week 3. And one day God just said, no, I just felt him say, no, I don't want you to talk about that. This is what I want you to talk about, because he's still working on this in me. And when you prepare a message and teach it, it goes even deeper. So I need this message tonight. I said to somebody in the lobby as I was greeting people, I sure hope we get a good message tonight, because I need it. So I need this message. So we're going to go back out on the lake, but let's remember where we left off last time. So they went out into the lake, and there was a storm, and it was a vicious storm, and something happened. It was really you have to be there kind of moment, because it was a ferocious storm that threatened to capsize the boat, and they're all going to drown. And then Jesus spoke 3 words. Do you remember what they were? Quiet. Be still. And then it was. And they were astonished, and actually they were terrified. And then they asked a question, also 3 words. And the question was, who is this? Who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? So now as we advance the story, the question is, are they getting the answer to that question? Are they learning the lesson? Who is this? And where we're going to land today, I'm just going to tell you, I want you to walk out with 3 words as well. These 3 words are a question that Jesus asked them in the boat, in the story we're going to see today. And it's a question that I believe Jesus wants to ask each of us tonight. It's the takeaway today. 3 words, one question, and we'll get there in the next 30 minutes. Now, since we left them, some things have happened. If you fast forward to Mark 8, that's where we're going to be tonight, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8. But before we get there, from calming the storm to where we are tonight, some things have happened, and the disciples have witnessed all of these. Imagine if you were an eyewitness to these things. He has raised a dead girl to life, and they saw it. He fed a multitude of 5,000 men with just a little bit of food, and they handed the food out and distributed it. They saw it before their own eyes. He walked to them on water. When they were out in the boat, he came to them. He has cast out demons. People who had been oppressed for years were set free at the command of Jesus. He healed a deaf and mute man right before them, and just now he has fed 4,000. So you're wondering the question, who is this that the waves and wind obey him? Well, he also is one that can raise the dead. He can heal the blind. He can cast out demons. He can walk on water. He can multiply bread. Who is this? Are they getting it? What do you think? What are the odds they're getting it? That they finally know the answer to that question? Well, we're going to see that right now. So here we are in a boat again. And I've said this to you before. I'm going to say it again. In these stories, for all of us, it's important that we just enter into it. You have to use your imagination. You have to put yourself there. I don't really want you to hear my words so much as I want you to enter into this with me and into what Jesus is about to do with his disciples. So this is Mark 8. You can see the words on the screen, or you can read in your Bible. This is what happens. Then he left them, and we'll see in a moment that them is the Pharisees. We're going to come back here in a moment. Jesus left them, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for the one loaf they had with them in the boat. Be careful, Jesus warned them. Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod. They discussed this with one another and said, it is because we have no bread. Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them. Now here's a bunch of questions. We're going to come back to this in a moment, but listen to these questions. Why are you still talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? 12, they replied. And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? They answered 7, and he said to them, do you still not understand? And by the way, that's one of my favorite questions, and there's another one, it's not in this passage, that's my personal favorite, it defines me. One time he says to the disciples, are you still so dull? D-U-L-L. So he had some honest words. I think he always said it with a twinkle in his eye. I don't think he was too harsh with them. But they had this problem where they had just experienced something extraordinary. And in fact, we're going to go look at it in just a moment. But they experienced all these things over time as they were walking with Jesus, and they get in the boat, and they're concerned about whether or not they had brought enough bread. Now, what has just happened in Mark chapter 8 before this scene is that he has fed the 4,000, and the Pharisees began to question Jesus and to test him. And they said, show us a sign. And so there's this argument that takes place, and now he gets back into the boat and pushes off, and now the disciples have this discussion about whether or not they brought enough bread. Now, when Jesus said, be careful of the leaven or the yeast of the Pharisees, what he was talking about is that represented teaching. And you know the saying that a little bit of yeast does what? Leavens the whole loaf, right? You don't have to put much in. He was saying, beware of their teaching, because they were just challenging Jesus and arguing with him. And he says, don't give in to their teaching, because if you take it in, it's gonna leaven everything. So that's what he meant by that statement. But this is what they heard. Oh no, how much bread do we have? Oh man, he's ticked off. We didn't bring any bread. No, wait, what just happened? He multiplied and fed thousands with just a little bit, and they're arguing among themselves, and they're concerned, and Jesus hears this. We're told that he was aware of what they were saying. I think that in this discussion, they were probably arguing with each other, whose job was it, and you were supposed to bring the bread, and here their bellies must have been full from what they just ate, and they're worried about their next meal, and they're worried that they're not going to have enough food, and Jesus is kind of ticked off about it, and they're probably blaming each other. Now, here's the 8 questions again. I want you to just see them on the screen. These are the 8 questions that Jesus asked them when they were concerned about whether the issue was having food or not for their next meal. Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not understand or see? Jesus is asking me that in my life. Craig, do you still not understand or see? Are your hearts hardened? Where somehow the truth of Jesus, the reality of Jesus, his provision for us, his faithfulness, that he can be trusted, has not penetrated my hard heart, and so I still doubt. Do you have eyes to see, eyes but fail to see, ears but fail to hear? Like, why isn't this going deeper? Come on, Craig, don't you remember? And when I broke the 5 loaves for 5,000, how many basketfuls did you pick up? And when I broke the 7 loaves. So he's taking them through now an exercise of remembering what he's done, his faithfulness. And then he ends with, do you still not understand? So that's me. I just want to tell you that's me. In fact, as I said, use your imagination. So let's get in the boat with them right now. And they didn't have a slip where the boat would come. They would pull the boats up to the shore. And to get in the boat, they would have to wade in. So right now, I want you to feel that on your feet. You got sandals on. You got a cloak that goes all the way down. You're now up to your knees. You're swinging your leg over the side of the boat. And all 12 of you are piling in with Jesus. And you're pushing off. And you're out in the Sea of Galilee. And you find, in spite of all of God's faithfulness and everything you've experienced in the last weeks and months for them, just one little question from Jesus, they misunderstand and they think that we're in trouble because we don't have food. And it's easy to call them clowns, which I did. And it's easy to point the finger and say, you got to be kidding. Are you really that stupid? How can anyone be that stupid? And I would challenge you tonight to go home and look in the mirror and ask that question. Unless you're some kind of a saint and you've got this all figured out and you always draw from the past faithfulness of God and you never worry and you never have anxiety and you never have doubt. So this is an important moment for the disciples because he takes them on this memory lesson and he gives them a little quiz. How many basketfuls? Well, that was 12 and that was, right, okay. So now he asks the question, don't you remember? We've got to remember. So what I want to do is I want to go back to shore now and I want to rewind part way back to where we were last time and I want to revisit the feeding of the 5,000. Because it was an extraordinary event, and we're going to visualize it tonight. And I think if we can do that, maybe it'll help us begin to remember and visualize the faithfulness of God in our own lives. Because they had a form of what I call spiritual amnesia. And I'm an expert at it. By the way, I spent a period of my professional life when I was younger as a therapist. And you know what my favorite kind of patient was, or client to see? One that had amnesia. Do you know why? Because I bill them on the way in and then bill them on the way out. Double pay. That's not really true. I was a therapist, and I don't think I ever treated anybody with amnesia, but I thought that was funny. So spiritual amnesia. I think we all suffer. I know I suffer from spiritual amnesia. I forget what God has done. So let's go back to this story of the feeding of the 5,000, and I don't know if you're familiar with this story or not, but the 5,000 said 5,000 men. And what that meant was that there were certainly women were there with them and their children were with them. And so we think the number actually was probably something like 15,000, maybe even 20,000. What's the sports arena here that seats 20,000 in Detroit area? Jolis Arena? Little Caesars? Okay, I haven't been in the new arena yet. I hear it's beautiful. So picture that many people on the shores. You got to have that in your mind for this to make any sense to you, what Jesus actually does here, how extraordinary this event is. So he's been teaching all day long. It's a very large crowd. It's getting late in the day. Everybody's hungry. And the disciples are concerned about the people being hungry. I think they might have been concerned about their own hunger as well. So they go to Jesus with a plan, and they say to Jesus, dismiss the crowd so they can go find dinner. Now, we're already told it was in a remote place, which means there was nothing close by. So Jesus says to them, 3 words, you feed them. Man, I don't know if I'm Matthew or Andrew or John when I'm thinking there, but I'm thinking, honestly, that's like one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Because we're traveling together and we bring our own provisions. So you kind of know how this works, Jesus, so you say you feed them. I asked you the very first week of this series back in, I guess it would have been February, do you ever argue with God? Because that very first story, Peter was out in the boat with Jesus, and he said, push out to the deep and put your nets out to catch fish. And Peter gave Jesus a fishing lesson. Told him why it was stupid and you can't catch fish in the middle of the day. But he caught this great catch of fish, right? So here we are again. Jesus says to them, simply, you feed them. And they push back, and I would have pushed back, certainly, probably you would have as well. The way I paraphrase what they said is they said, have you lost your mind, Jesus? Now, if you look at Mark, you won't actually see those words, but here's what they said. They said it will cost 8 months' wages to get that much food. So how do you expect us to do this? Not to mention it's in a remote place. So how are we going to do this? So then Jesus asked another question, 4 words this time. What do you have? Did it matter? Seriously? Yeah, Jesus, I forgot. Right over that hill are our camels with U-Hauls, connected to it that we dragged all the way here for this teaching time. How could we have forgotten that? Of course, let's go get the food out of the U-Hauls and drag it up here. Like whatever they would have had would have been just a few, maybe a basket or 2 of food, right? So, but he still asked them that question, what do you have? And they answer 5 loaves and 2 fish. And it might have looked something like this. 5 loaves. And you don't think I have the fish, but I do. All right, so picture now I'm standing in the middle of Little Caesars Arena. And Jesus is next to me, and he says, yeah, these people are hungry. Craig, feed them. There's no way I can feed them. Well, what do you have? Here we go. So you know what Jesus is going to say next. Yeah, you better send them out to get food because this is all we have. There's no way. And by the way, if you tried to feed that many people, what's going to happen? You're going to get to 2 people, 3, 4 people, and then there's going to be a riot because the rest did not get fed. When the tsunami hit India back in 2005, we took a team from Kensington there, and we went to the coast where everything had been wiped out, and we had truckloads of rice and all kinds of things to help people restore their lives, pots and pans, etc. And when we got there, we started handing it out, and the word spread from villages, and they started coming, and we got surrounded, and it was a riot. Like, I didn't think we were going to get out of there alive. Because when people are hungry and provisions are there, everybody wants their part of it, and so there was a stampede. So I'm thinking, 20,000 people there potentially in a basket, and Jesus says, you feed them? I don't know what they would have thought, but then here's what he says. He says, have them sit down in groups. Groups of 50 to 100, and I did the math on that, and if it's 20,000 people, that's about 30 groups per disciple. Each of the 12 disciples had to get 30 groups together. And that took a little bit of time to do that. And while they're doing that, if I'm Bartholomew, I'm looking for the escape. Because what are you saying to them as you're sitting them down? Okay, it's dinner time. So you guys sit here, okay, in the grass, and we have another group here, and Peter's doing the same thing over there, and Nathaniel's doing it over there, and Judas is doing it over there. And as they spread out, it's taking time to get them organized, and they have to be telling them food is coming. Meantime, you know that this is what Jesus has got at his feet. How is this going to work? So I have to give them credit that they didn't run for the hills. They actually did it, but I don't know what they were thinking. I bet you their hearts are beating. How is this going to work? How is this going to work? So he gets them in the groups, and then here's like the amazing words. They all ate and were satisfied. And it's funny, when I was a kid in Sunday school classes and the story was told, and they had little, what did they call them, flannel graphs or something? And they'd put the little characters up on the board, and it was Jesus feeding the people, and they're all lined up neat and orderly in line. It's like, I wonder, did these people ever actually read the Bible? Because it never says that. It says the disciple, he said, you feed them. Then he had them get in groups, and then they came to Jesus, and he broke it and gave it to them, and they began to distribute it, which again took a very long time to do that. How is that happening? There's nothing's described about how that was happening. It's like they came back to the basket, and there was always more. And so each of the disciples had this opportunity to go to up to 30 different groups and feed them with the food that they had, because Jesus said, what do you have? You feed them, what do you have? It's going to be enough. And so they feed them. And they were satisfied. They were all satisfied. And now so this is the part of remembering. And I want you to have this experience. This is, by the way, I'm quite certain, not how it happened. This is not how it happened, but this is how it's going to happen tonight. So when they were all done eating and satisfied, and their bellies were filled, and this miracle has taken place, and I don't think the groups out there probably knew what miracle it was. It was the disciples that knew because they were coming back and receiving from Jesus and then distributing. Key idea here. Jesus provided, and then they provided. They were a conduit of blessing there, and they came back 30 times each to get more food and bring it back out. And when they were all done, they had to collect the leftovers. Wait, the leftovers? How can there be leftovers? And Jesus in the boat now, in their story we're in tonight, when he asked them, he gave them a pop quiz, and he said, how many baskets did you collect of pieces? 12. So let's imagine that this is actually what happened. So he called them out by name to bring it back to Jesus as they collected them. And so Peter would come, having collected the scraps, and he would bring it up and set it at Jesus' feet. And then Andrew, he would call out, Andrew. And Andrew would come and bring to Jesus the baskets of the leftovers. And then James. And then he would call out John. Bring the leftovers. And Philip. You've got anything, Philip? And Bartholomew. Make sure you get it all. We care about the environment. Thaddeus. Matthew. Thomas, you too. Make sure you get it all. James. Judas. Simon. Just want you to look at it now for a moment. Let's wait for Simon. See, this was the original basket, so let's take this one away because it's empty now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12. Full. Now, we've read about this story, but we weren't there. But the ones that were there did this. They saw the one become the 12 of scraps that were left over. Do you ever forget a story like that? What's the answer to that question? Yeah, you want to say no, but it's yes. Because Jesus said to them, don't you remember? How could you forget this? And it's so easy for me, it's always been easy for me to make fun of the disciples and ridicule them and say they're clowns, as I already called them tonight. Sorry, disciples, I called you clowns. But I'm a fellow clown with you because I have had so many times in my life where I've struggled to remember. I remember when I first went to seminary, I was 22 years old. I'd never left Michigan. I went all the way out to Los Angeles. Cross country, I drove a junkered car that barely got me there. I had hardly any money. I had to find a job. I'm renting an apartment with some friends. And I get a job in August, and when I get to Labor Day weekend, I've run out of money, but I got a job, and my first paycheck was coming on the Friday of Labor Day weekend. I went to the place to get my check, and the person that was supposed to pay me said, I'm sorry, but we had a problem with our accounting system, and the checks are not available till Tuesday. And I had zero money, and I had zero food in my apartment. I'm not talking about, I didn't have a box of macaroni and cheese, which is what I lived on during seminary, by the way. I had nothing. So I remember literally going home and just like sitting on the couch and staring at the window with my stomach grumbling, thinking, I'm 3,000 miles from home, I have no money and no food. And it's Friday, and I'm not going to get paid till Tuesday. And so at some point I got out, went out my apartment, and was walking down. It was a double-decker apartment thing and outside entrance. And as I walked out, a guy said, "Hey, are you going to Talbot Seminary?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I thought I saw you on campus today. My name's Cliff, and my wife here, his name is Deborah. And hey, what are you doing for dinner tonight?" And I had to think, well, let's see. I kind of think I had plans, but why? Why are you asking? Why don't you come and join us for dinner? So I went in and had this wonderful dinner and spent hours getting to know some friends, and I went to bed that night satisfied. I got up in the morning, and I walked outside, and I could smell bacon cooking. Is there anything more inviting than bacon cooking? Even if you're a vegetarian, you got to admit, that smell is like awful. But I have no food. So I'm smelling this bacon, and I'm going down the steps, and someone opens the door and says, "Hey." I said, "Hi." He goes, "My name's Rod. Gail's my wife. We're here in seminary. I think I saw you yesterday on campus. Would you like to have some breakfast with us?" Well, let me think about that a minute. Sure. Okay, I could take the rest of my teaching time, to tell you what happened Saturday, Sunday. I got invited to 2 picnics on Memorial Day, or Labor Day, and when I hit Tuesday morning, I gained 5 pounds. It's the best I've ever eaten in my life, right? And because of that, I've never once my whole life doubted God again. I've never had any anxiety or any worry. 100% cured of that, right? No? Don't you remember? Do you still not understand? Is your heart so hard? Are you so dull? Because I had this kind of experience right here. When I got to Tuesday morning and went and got my paycheck, it's like, maybe I should just turn it back in and say, "God, would you like to feed me? Because that's way better than I eat." And yet, again and again, I've struggled with this. In fact, the most humorous one for me was actually in India, probably about 15 years ago. And we had started Kensington and others had started to build this campus, and we built an orphanage, and it was all built up, the building, but we weren't able to furnish it. And a team from Kensington was there, and I was leading the team, and we did a Sunday morning service, and I gave the message to a translator, and I taught on feeding the 5,000. And I can still remember what my application or challenge. And these are people that are very, very poor. And when Jesus said, "What do you have?" that's what I landed on. And I said, whatever you have is enough for God. What do you have? That's all He asks of you. You give Him what you have, and it's going to be enough. And so we shouldn't doubt, and we should trust God. That was my challenge. That was my message. And I'm sure it was the best ever given in the whole country of India and all time. And I went down after with our hosts and sat down on the floor as we would sit to eat, and our team is around. And Jaya, who was our host, during the meal said, "Well, it's great the buildings are done, but we've run out of money, and we have no beds, and it's for 200 children. We have no beds or mattresses, so they're going to sleep on the floor on like a real thin sheet, and that's not what we want to do." And so me, the great preacher, who just preached this message, said, "Well, what would it take to get the beds?" And he gave us a dollar figure. And I turned to someone on my team, dead serious, and said, "Where are we going to get the money to do that? Like, how are we going to feed all these people?" I just preached it. And I was literally wringing my hands, and I felt anxious immediately because, I thought that we had raised enough money to do this, and now I'm picturing these kids sleeping on the floor, and there's no money, and I was just immediately filled with anxiety or worry. And one of my friends, Jeff Pethrick, turned at me and said, serious, deadpan, he said, "How many loaves and fish do you have?" And it was just like this. I turned beet red, and I said, "Yeah, I think I need to go hear a message about that, the one I just gave." So I just feel like this spiritual amnesia, this ability to forget, is rampant among us. It is for me. I don't want to project this on you necessarily, but it's very easy to have experiences where suddenly 12 baskets are there because God has provided, and we forget it. We have a problem with remembering. And I think the reality is remembering is very simple. I'm going to give you a definition, but it's so simple. Remembering is really bringing the past into the present. That's all you do when you remember. So why don't we remember God's faithfulness? When we find ourselves staring down at something that would overwhelm us again, why do we have trouble recalling it? And I think the primary reason is that we are so earthly bound, we are so bound by our senses. Our immediate experience defines it. It defines reality for us. For the disciples, it was not enough bread out in the lake where there were no stores. It was very simple. They just saw the bread multiplied and fed thousands of people, and now they're out in the lake. They only have one loaf. That's not enough for 13 people, and you can't get to a store out in the middle of the lake. And so their immediate experience dulled their ability to remember what Jesus had just done. And I think if that was true of them, how hard is it for us? You know, most of us have not had a tangible miracle like this, visually that we can see, yet they themselves had trouble remembering this experience that they had had. And so we tend to analyze the circumstances around us and go right to the point of doubt about it. Where's God in this, or what is he going to do? And I have to tell you, this last year, as I shared when I first got here in the fall, I had an unusual year for me. I lost a job. I'd never lost a job before. At the age that I was at, I had all these worries and anxieties and fears about it, and I did not go, and I went out west for about 3 months, and I did not go to a place where I just sat and just embraced faith. But what I did do was I started journaling again, and I started writing down every single day. I haven't missed a day since March 17th of 2020. And some of this journaling was beginning to work on my memory, because I've lived a lot of life, and I've been in a lot of difficult situations before. This seemed like an overwhelming one for me, but I took time to start recalling and remembering what God has done, how he has shown up in my life when there was a problem or a difficulty or an uncertainty or anxiety or financial or medical or whatever it was. Not just me, but for people that I love, people in my life. And I filled up in the last year, I don't know how many of these. And then after a month, I go back and reread them. And began to get into a place of recall, God has been amazing in my life. I haven't been spared from problems. Not everything has been solved, but God has either been faithful in providing what I needed or faithful to bring me strength and endurance and comfort and peace that passes understanding again and again and again. So we need to get better. I need to get better at remembering. And I'm going to give you 3 memory tools, 3 things that we can do. The first one is what I call memorials. There's a story in the Old Testament when the Israel came into the Promised Land, and they crossed the Jordan River during flood stage. But before they got to the other side of the Jordan into the Promised Land, they were given some instructions. Listen to this. So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe. And he said to them, "Go over before the ark of the Lord, your God, into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, 'What do these stones mean?' tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever." So it wasn't just for them. It was learning to tell the stories, like this story. Why do we tell a story like this? I doubt we'll ever be in a situation where we need to multiply bread to feed 20,000 people. But we tell stories and we have memorials so that we can remember the faithfulness of God. The stories in the Old Testament that are given to us, the stories in the Gospels, are to remind us of the faithfulness of God. But God is not done working. Isn't he still writing new stories? We just sang in the first song about the God of miracles. This is a God who still provides. Has he shown up for you when you needed him deeply? Has he provided for you? Sometimes financially, sometimes a friendship, sometimes wise counsel, sometimes just peace when there's darkness around you. The stories are still being written today. There are stories. And the benefit of these stories is to memorialize them, to find ways to remember. I have all these because I'm at home in my apartment, I couldn't bring any tonight in New York City, but I have all these things that I've taken from different places in my life where I've been. I have quite a few from India that speak to how God has provided, and they're things visually that I see. In fact, Good Friday this year, I went out into the woods, into a park, I forget the name of it, Wolcott Park, with some other pastors, and Craig McGlasson invited me to go with them, and we went out at 6 a.m. in the dark, and we were there for sunrise, and we built a fire, and we stood around, and we shared our stories, and we prayed together, we took communion, and God met me in such a significant way there, and it's very, very personal, but I grabbed a little stick that was right there on the ground, and I had it with me today, and I left it. I forgot to bring it here, but it's in my jacket. I'm carrying this around with me because you know what? I will forget. So every time I put my hand in my jacket for the last couple of weeks and I feel that in there, it reminds me. Maybe you don't need this kind of thing, But we have to find a way to memorialize the faithfulness of God. When he speaks to us, when he shows up, when he provides, when there's a miracle, we have to find a way that we don't develop amnesia and forget the faithfulness of God. So memorials. The second tool that I have already mentioned that I use is journaling. I'm just going to call it spiritual practices. It's in the discipline of getting time every day to sit alone with God. You don't have to write it out. I have to write it out. If I don't write it out, my mind wanders when I'm with God. So I write out my prayers. I write out what I think he's saying to me. But it's just hitting the pause button and saying, where have I seen God at work? Where has God been in my life the last few days, the last week, the last months, or the last year? It may not feel this way to you, but me being here right now in Michigan, back at Kensington, the church that launched us to New York City, a church that changed my life when I came on staff, this is a miracle for me. I sat in worship in tears over there, saying, well, I get to be a part of this community right now. When a year ago at this time, if you read my journal, I should have grabbed it and read it to you. It was so depressing. You know what stuff I was writing stuff like? I was writing like, this is not going to end well. I actually wrote that. This great man of faith, God, this is not going to end well. Because I'm unemployed and turning 65 this summer. I've lost my health insurance. What am I going to do? And then I sit here tonight and get to be among this community as a pastor right now and worshiping together. And it's just like, you got to be kidding me. Now, am I going to find myself a year from now, like the disciples back in the boat saying, oh, it's because we forgot to bring bread? Is Jesus going to have to say to Craig again, don't you remember? Probably. But that's not what I want to happen. And so this has become my chronicle of how God is providing in my life right now. And then the last one is this, community. The last memory tool is community, which is sharing our stories. I hope you have people in your life that you're sharing stories with each other of God's faithfulness, because when one is up, sometimes the other's down. And our stories of God's faithfulness can be encouraging. We need to hear the miracles that are happening in each other's lives so that we can encourage that God is real and he's alive and he's active and he's with us and he's among us. And he still is the miracle worker, way maker, as we sing. That's the God that we serve. And that will help chase away the amnesia that we struggle with, and we forget God's faithfulness. And there's so many benefits when we remember that God is with us. How big is that? Trust grows, peace grows, confidence, anticipation, and joy. And so the three words, this is what I want you to remember. They're three words, but they're really four actually, because your name comes first. And I can't see most of you because the lights are so bright, so if I call out a name, I'm not looking at you if I happen to get the name right in that direction. But, right now, here's the three words, but four with your name. Frank, don't you remember? It's Jesus asking, not Craig. You're in the boat right now with Jesus. And he looks you in the eyes and he says, Susan, don't you remember? I want you to take the present circumstance that's pressing hard on you right now, that you'd like to be released from or released through. Bring that to your mind. And now I want you to be in the boat with Jesus. And I want you to hear him say to you, Angela, don't you remember? Alice, don't you remember? Ted, don't you remember? Richard, don't you remember? And I think I used to hear those words kind of scolding almost. I don't hear them that way anymore. I hear Jesus longing that we would remember, because we're bringing our own misery on ourselves when we have spiritual amnesia and we forget. Don't you remember? The song that we're going to sing next, one of my favorite worship songs, and the song is called Oceans. And the thing I think I love about it is you picture an ocean that seems overwhelming, that's crashing in on you. And then the refrain is, but I will call upon your name. And the name that we're calling upon is the very one that can do something about what we're facing. I started by asking you, do you think Jesus is in the room? Jesus, are you here? We don't call to one who's far off, who's preoccupied, who's too busy, isn't available. We call to one who is always present with us, even if we forget that. And we call to the one who's promised to never leave us or forsake us. And it's in that moment that when he responds to that cry of our heart, to that call, that the work begins. And we're building another memory. And it's a lifetime of memories of the faithfulness of God. And that's why it's so important to assemble together like we have tonight, collectively, to say, we believe, God. Jesus, we believe that you're real, that you're here, that you're present, that you're available, that you care, and that you hear our cries and that you respond. And so I hope you can just lean into this song with all your heart, soul, and mind to experience the reality of the God who provides, the God who responds, and make even this night another memory. Or maybe something tonight, God says something to you very specifically about what you're facing, about what's ahead, what you're concerned about, what you're worried about. And in working on this message, I had to pour it all out to him again. And it was such a good exercise to go through. And it's an exercise I want for you, even in these moments, that you would make it all available, vulnerable before him as we call on the name of the one who loves us so deeply.
Call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where feet may fail. And there I find you in the mystery, in oceans deep, my faith will stand. And I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you are mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail and fear surrounds me, you've never failed, and you won't start now. So I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you are mine. Oh, you are mine. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. So I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, and you are mine. I get lost inside this wonder, 'cause there's so much to discover. New dimensions of your glory, and I've only seen a glimpse. You keep drawing me, you keep drawing me closer to responds with holy, holy. Oh, you never cease to amaze me, and it's only just the start. Oh, it's only just the start. You keep trying me, you keep trying me, closer to your heart. You keep calling me, you keep calling me, closer to your heart. You keep drawing me, you keep drawing me, closer to your heart. You keep calling me, you keep calling me, closer to your heart. I get lost in your love, I get lost in your love. Full of awe and wonder, full of awe and wonder. I get lost in your love, I get lost in your love. Full of awe and wonder, full of awe and wonder. I get lost in your love, I get lost in your love. Full of awe and wonder, full of awe and wonder. I get lost in your love, I get lost in your love. Full of awe and wonder, full of awe and wonder. You keep drawing me, you keep drawing me, closer to your heart. You keep calling me, you keep calling me, closer to your heart. You keep drawing me, you keep drawing me, closer to your heart. closer to your heart.
If you could just have a seat for about 2 more minutes and we'll wrap up. You know, one of the extraordinary things about this last year, besides all the difficulty, is the faithfulness of many of you here and those that are watching online right now, that are with us online. We're going to take a few moments at the very end here to receive our offering. This would be a year it would have been so easy to just pull back. I mean, I was tempted to do that. I couldn't see how it was all going to work out. I was the guy that was writing in my journal, this is not going to end well. And yet God was faithful. He's provided for everything that our family needed. No debt. We've had food every day and shelter, and God has provided. And this last year, we saw just an abundance of generosity from this community, from you. And so we thank you for that. When it would have been easy to count the loaves and the fish and say, you know, I think I better just tuck some away. That Kensington has met all of its obligations. We've not incurred any debt. We've paid all of our bills. We've not had to pull back any ministry. In fact, we've been able to expand and do more. We saw your generosity at the end of the year, in December when we reached out to families in need. And so we just are so grateful to be in a community that's taking these risks, that is trusting God and building memories of God's faithfulness and His provision. So thank you. You can give on your way out or online or through the app, or you can mail a check in, and we just thank you again for that. Next month is our last lesson on the lake, and I remember when I started in February, I said Lake St. Clair is frozen. I'd love to give the last lesson out on the lake somewhere. Wouldn't that be fun if we get a couple big boats and go out to Strawberry Island, right? Anchor out there, bring some food. I don't know how to organize that. So we're not going to do that. We're going to meet back here, but it's the final lesson in John, and it starts in the water just offshore, and then it ends up right on the shoreline with Jesus in some of his last days after his resurrection. I'm really excited to get there with all of you. So that will be the third week, the third Wednesday in, what month are we in? That would be May. So it's been great to be together. We continue this weekend with our series on the family, and we have a great morning planned for everybody. And then 2 weeks, in 2 Sundays, not this Sunday, the next, May 2nd, we're going to be baptizing some men and women who have made the decision to follow Jesus, and they want to declare that publicly. We're going to do it right here on the stage. And I've read a few of the testimonies that have come in from people in our community that are going to be baptized, and it's just going to be extraordinary. So we look forward to celebrating that together with you. God bless. Have a good evening.